Hello and welcome to another anime character analysis. If an individual has the power to pass judgment over others, does that person have the right to do so? Even in matters of life and death? What if that person has motivations that aren't so easily distinguished between good or evil? How do we draw such a line? As the saying goes, absolute power corrupts absolutely. These questions pertain greatly to this particular anime character, one of the most iconic anime and manga characters of all time, the protagonist of Death Note, Light Yagami. This video will be something of an analysis of his character, but also of what his character represents, particularly with the moral questions involving the Death Note. Alright, let's dive in. When we are first introduced to Light, we see that he is a young man in his late teens. He's a freshman college student who the audience learns is very intelligent but rather bored with his life. As he is walking home one day, he finds a mysterious book called the Death Note. It turns out that this book is a mystical object from the spirit world, in which when a name is written within it, that person shall die. Light isn't sure if the book is authentic, but after some experimentation, he discovers that the book is real. After briefly contemplating whether or not to use the book, he decides that his intelligence makes him a legitimate candidate for its use, and proclaims that he will use the Death Note to punish criminals who manage to escape the reach of justice. He then meets the owner of the book, a Shinigami named Ryuk. The Shinigami being a race of demonic creatures who use the Death Notes to take human lives in order to extend their own. Interestingly, on purpose for his own amusement, curious to see what would happen. It's in these early moments that Light first demonstrates his ambition ability to pass judgment over others. Taking the name Kira to hide his identity, Light goes on a vigilante rampage, killing murderers and rapists all across Japan. This eventually attracts the attention of the Master Detective L. Using the moniker as a fake name, suspecting Kira's ability to kill others is limited to seeing faces and knowing names. Much of the series after this point consists of an intense game of wits between L and his special team of investigators, and Light, as he continues his murder spree, while avoiding L's team. Despite the fact that Light begins his personal quest focusing on punishing those convicted of serious crimes, as the situation becomes more intense and the walls close around him, Light doesn't hesitate to kill anyone who will get in his way, even if they are innocent in his eyes. The first major evidence of this is the murder of the FBI agent Pember, whom Light kills simply to save his own skin. He would even kill Pember's wife once she became involved in the case. These individuals weren't necessarily horrible people, even in Light's view. They were simply people who were in his way. Essentially, in Light's quest for justice in the world, the distinction between those he believes should be punished and those who oppose him becomes mute. As Light grows more confident, he feels more legitimized in his beliefs, his ego growing to the point where opposing him is a crime in and of itself. Light also proves to be incredibly charismatic, and this enables him to convince many people who suspect him of being Kira that he's nothing of the sort. In fact, Light manages to put on such a convincing act that he eventually manages to become part of his own investigation. His ingenuity and cruel methodology also come into play with the introduction of Misa. Misa is a young actress whose family was killed before her eyes. Light used the Death Note to eliminate this man, causing Misa to seek him out. Interestingly, Misa has her own Shinigami companion and even more power than Light himself. Misa comes to admire him and serves his cause with absolute devotion. Light reveals perhaps his coldest element, deciding to use Misa's admiration for him as a means of control, planning to dispose of her when she no longer serves his purposes. The series continues, and Light demonstrates his use of his massive intellect, managing to kill his rival L and even take his place as head of the investigative task force. Light's ego grows out of control as he rules over most of the world with the power of the Death Note, able to take the lives of anyone he believes should die. His ambitions and desire for power continue to grow out of control as his own father even becomes one of his victims. However, as Light's power grows, so does his paranoia. He begins to distrust Misa, and uses a newly appointed district attorney Teru Mikami as his new disciple. He also grows overconfident and somewhat careless, having used his influence to slowly diminish the investigation of Kira. These two aspects ultimately lead to his undoing, as his overconfidence draws more suspicion to him, and his lack of trust and compassion, leaving him friendless, as his own pawns turn against him, resulting in his death. There is no doubt that Light Yagami is a cold, sadistic, and ruthless individual. However, the audience must take into account a number of factors when observing this character. Firstly, Light may have committed many terrible acts, taking the lives of many people. While this is certainly morally questionable to say the least, in the earliest sections of the story, Light is at least taking these actions with some restraint and tries to use logic to determine who should die. Yes, he is playing God, but he believed that he was making the world a better place, having been frustrated by the flaws of the justice system in his country. While one could argue that there is always a seed of evil within Light, one could make that argument about anyone in such a situation. Before finding the Death Note, Light was a brilliant student from a good family with a promising future. If he had not been given such power, perhaps Light might have done some real good in the world. After all, he did indicate a desire to change it. It could be argued that it was the power of the Death Note itself which slowly changed Light from a young, idealistic vigilante into a ruthless dictator and mass murderer, though this implies that there was something evil within him to begin with, suggesting that different circumstances may have provided a different future for him. This creates a difficult conundrum for us viewers. Light is in fact an evil character from fairly early on in the series. Lies within all human beings. This is frightening, but it serves to make us ponder these questions in the hope that we could resist the urge of such power and not go down the dark path of Light Yagami. Over the years, some fans have claimed Light as an anti-hero, much along the lines of Lelouch from Code Geass. However, unlike Lelouch, Light did not live under an oppressive regime. Yes, they both made questionable decisions in their quest to improve society. Light did in fact begin the series wanting to right wrongs in an imperfect world. However, that goal ultimately got the best of him. His own ego eventually overtook his idealistic goals. Also, one cannot ignore his cold demeanor in disposing of those in his path, including those who cared for him, such as Misa and even his own father. Light shows little remorse in the execution of such acts. As the series concludes, Light shows his true face, being a man concerned only with his own life, and in the end he died alone, swallowed whole by his own ambition and lack of morality. Light is easily one of the most interesting and frightening villains in anime history. It's safe to say that he left his mark. Well, that was my spin on Light Yagami. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comment box below. This is Merlina Boss, signing off again. Until next time, guys.